Okay, well, welcome everyone to our final session today in the impact of writing for your public health career. Today, we're going to be talking a lot about the uh, need for writing a good elevator pitch for cover letters, personal statements, and more. And what we're going to, again, encourage everybody, if they have questions, to please drop them in the chat as we go through. Just to give you an idea of exactly what we'll be going over, the more part of it is really going to be talking a little bit about emails, if we have time to get to follow-up letters as well. But I think, touching on the need for developing a good elevator pitch is always helpful. We always know that a cover letter is a sometimes a necessary thing to have any job application, but knowing what to include in there, how it can be written, the structure you can have for it, a little bit about personal statements, and also to touch on some of the things that Jeanette had mentioned earlier in the day in writing these statements and things that would be good to include, and then talking a little bit about email etiquette as well. So let's get right into the talking about it, creating or doing your elevator pitch. So first question would be, what exactly is a good length of an elevator pitch? And when we think about writing an elevator pitch, this is something that should be able to be spoken and said in ideally 1 minute, but under 2 minutes, but not feeling rushed. So this style of how you present your elevator pitch is really going to be up to you. And it's also going to be up to you in terms of how comfortable you are with saying something. But I think part of what you want to kind of keep in mind, it is a short, quick summary of who you are. If we think about an elevator pitch, what are the words that should be included in an elevator pitch? And so usually your word length should be anywhere between 150 to 250 words. And knowing that most of the times when people are talking at a normal rate, there's a certain way that we speak, but then there's also to combine with how somebody processes that information and gets that information and hearing what somebody has to say. And a lot of times people are paying attention to more of the first 20 to 30 words, and that's what you're using to grab their attention. So you want to make sure that those first 30 words that you're going to say as your elevator pitch are going to be things that would be appealing to them and things that they really want to know about you in that quick, short amount of time to grab their attention. A little bit too with, why is an elevator pitch important? Because it can communicate the most important parts about you in a very short amount of time. So it's a good way to showcase your skills, showcase your training. It's a good way to be able to, help you decide exactly what you want to communicate about yourself. So an elevator pitch is a sales pitch, but it's also not a sales pitch. It's just a way to inform somebody about who you are and what it is you want them to know about you and what do you think are the important things. And part of what to think about, again, with this elevator pitch is if you only have a short amount of time to grab their attention, what are the key things you'd want to say about yourself? What are the key things you want them to remember? Why exactly is it called an elevator pitch? Well, it's called an elevator pitch or an elevator speech because the idea is that in the amount of time that you would have a brief elevator ride with somebody from a bottom floor, say, to a top floor, in that moment, if it's just the two of you in that elevator, you have that person's captive attention. You have them there to kind of speak with them. And so that's the idea you want to do with this, is to kind of envision this idea of doing the elevator pitch as I have a short amount of time to grab their attention. And so within that, I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to make myself stand out. All right. So what makes up a good virtual pitch or a good elevator pitch? So one of the things you want to kind of keep in mind with this is identifying your goals, explain what you do, communicate your USP, and I'll talk a little bit about what that is, putting it all together, and then practicing it. And then this idea of your elevator pitch should be something that you practice just as much as you do your interview. Your elevator pitch is something that you can practice pretty much with anybody to make sure that it is saying what it is that you'd want it to say. So let's talk about each one of the parts. So identifying your goal. So start thinking about the objective of your pitch. What are you using it for? Start to think about, do I want a simple and engaging speech to explain what I want to do now and after I finish my training? So the idea is that you want to be not only thinking about present, you also want to be thinking about future, thinking about where you think that you're going, what it is that you think you're going to do after you finish your training. So for example, an elevator, something you can start with is saying, I'm interested in gaining experience in X field of public health, or I have varying interest in my next step, but here are a few that I'm considering. So it's the idea is that you can acknowledge kind of where you currently are, but then you can also to say, well, this is the direction I can see myself going. This is the goal that I have in mind. I have a short-term goal and I have a long-term goal. I have a short-term goal of increasing my my skill sets in epi and biostats with a long-term goal of wanting to be X or working in X field or something like that. So it is a good idea to kind of think about this as very much a tool set or as an introduction to where you are and where you want to be. Explain what you want to do. So this gets in a little bit more details about it. So start your sales pitch by what it is that you've done. If you need to be reminded what that is, use your profile of your resume as a good way or summary of information from your resume that you would say. So it might be the idea is you're thinking about how would I walk somebody through my resume? How would I explain to them what it is I've done? So you ask yourself this question is, what is my audience and who is my audience? What do I want them to remember? So the idea is, what is that takeaway? What is it that I want to make sure that they're left with that they know that I might want to do? Hopefully your sales pitch, no matter what you tell them, is something that's going to be intriguing to them, that they're going to smile, that they're going to get excited about your future. They're going to see the potential of what it is that you'd have. So part of what this is this elevator pitch should also to come across as something that shows your enthusiasm. It's something that says to them that you are very interested in this. They might not remember everything you say, but they're going to read the body language the way that you say it. They're going to read the nonverbal cues, your mannerisms, the way that you're saying is to really kind of measure how strongly you feel about something like this. Next, you want to think about your USP. So USP is your unique selling proposition. So an elevator pitch is something that should be thought of as, what is it that I can uniquely use to set myself apart from everybody else? So identify what makes you, what are your skills, what is your training, what is it that makes you unique? What is it you think that makes you kind of stand out? So for example, it could be something as a soon-to-be graduate, I think my background, my training, and my interests are well aligned with what's going on in your organization. So it's the idea is, what are the identifiable things that you think you have that could be a good match for them, the things that they would make you stand out to them. You can think of your USP as what is your competitive edge? So it might be in some ways your competitive edge is the fact that you're getting your training at the top school of public health in the world. You can think of your competitive edge as that the faculty members that I'm being trained by are some of the best in the field that I want to work in. You can say to yourself that my competitive edge is that I'm a part of a network of alumni that are the leaders in the field of public health. So think about whatever it is that you think could be both about you personally that you think sets you apart, or maybe it's the institution that you're with or the network of people that you know, or whatever that may be that you think might be good. But always think about what is it that kind of sets me apart, maybe from everybody else that might be maybe applying for a job or being considered by an employer. All right. So we've talked a lot about kind of the goal, what you want to explain about yourself, what is your unique selling point, kind of how do you put it all together, and how do you put it together in such a way to where you have to say this in like 30 seconds, really. So one of the things you want to kind of think about your pitch is that, reading it aloud and it kind of measuring how long it takes you to say this about yourself is a good idea. So one of the things you might want to just practice with this is think about what it is you're going to say, put a quick timer on, use your phone or something like that, or ask a friend or a classmate or somebody to just listen in to what it is you have to say. And then you want to start to cut things out that aren't really necessary. You want to really kind of think to yourself, do I need to say this extra piece of information? Do they really need to know this particular piece of information? Is this really going to give them the kind of most important points of information that I need them to know? It is fine to have general overviews, but I do think it would be helpful to kind of, think about what is it that I can demonstrate and say about myself that would speak to an organization, that would really stand out to them in terms of what it is. And so part of what you want to think about this is that it could be highly tailored. It could be highly tailored to different types of people you're talking to in different places. You might have a lot of experiences. You may have experience working in healthcare. You might have experience in doing research. You might have experience in working with, with global organizations. Well, they probably only really want to hear about the work you're doing with the global organization if that's the employer. So keep that in mind too. And your general overviews are fine if you're not too certain of who you're talking to, but tailoring it would always be good as well. And then the biggest thing you can do to try to do this is just try to relax as much as possible. So the idea is that it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to say everything the right way, but what you're thinking about it is this enough to get them interested in wanting to talk more? So it doesn't have to be that everything is covered in that 30 seconds or that elevator pitch, but that elevator pitch is a way just to continue the conversation, to have them continue to want to talk to you. And you being relaxed, you being yourself, you being very authentic with what you're doing, you showing enthusiasm and interest in what you're saying about yourself, those are all things that people will remember. So, the idea that you can really try to be yourself and share what it is that you're most interested in usually is going to be a good thing. And then finally, practice. So the idea is to say is that, it's how you say it is almost important in the way that in what you say. So your tone, your speed, your enthusiasm, again, to talk about it. These are the things that people will kind of notice. So if you don't practice, most likely you're going to go into this talking very fast. You're going to sound very unnatural, and then you're going to probably miss important things you want to say about yourself. So you want to kind of allow for that space to know, how is it that I can talk with pauses? How is it that I can talk so I'm not using verbal tics? How is it that I can talk to where I have a tone to what it, or a rhythm to what it is that I'm saying? And you really want to treat that elevator pitch as a good way so you can practice that and get maybe even better as a public speaker because you're practicing these elevator pitches. You want it to sound smooth. You don't want it to feel like it's aggressive, hard sales pitch about yourself. You want it to be a conversation starter more than anything else. And then as you practice it, you're going to vary the pitch. You're varying the pitch is okay, so it doesn't sound like you're too prepared, even though that it is. And so what we're trying to say here with this is that you really want to kind of think about, that you want to show the appropriate amounts of enthusiasm about something in certain places, but you're not going to really know how well you're doing at it until you practice it. And this is one of those things, just like interviewing, it's a practice skill. So the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, the more comfortable you're going to feel with it, the more comfortable you're going to feel with introducing yourself and knowing what things to say and how it is to say it, and how it is you can say things that really stand out to people. Because you can practice this and say, what am I getting positive feedback on? Where am I getting the head nods and the smiles? Where is it that the things that I'm saying people are noticing as well? And then try having talking points as opposed to sentences of text. So when we have sentences or when we have paragraph, we very much feel like, okay, I got to keep to the script. I'm memorizing lines. And I don't think you want to kind of do that when thinking about your elevator pitch. I think part of what you want to think about it is, these are the couple of things I want to say about myself. I want to be authentic in the moment. I want to be present in the moment and talk about those things, not feel like I'm trying to remember a line of information that I've memorized ahead of time as well. So I want to leave you with a couple kind of resources and different things like that about how to do pitches. I want to share with you also one of our alums, Natasha, who has presented at this Winter Intersession Career Development Academy before. She has a great kind of presentation on telling your story, telling that elevator pitch. She's a really great presenter, but we have other things here as well that can talk about that elevator pitch and what it is to cover and talk about. Before I move on to the next thing, are there any questions or anything that I can add, or Olivia, Jeanette, anything that could be mentioned or talked about here as well?
Nothing that I can think of. I think you've done great there, Paul.
Cool, thanks.
Absolutely. I think that you've covered a lot.
Yep. Um, I will just say with the elevator pitch, you might be doing it and not even realize that you are doing it. So this is also to anytime somebody, is talking to you and say, tell me what you do, or if you're practicing the tell me about yourself question during the interview, you're actually in some ways doing your elevator pitch. So you might have been doing this and had more practice in this than you think. But the idea is when you start to push it towards I'm trying to convince somebody or using it as a sales pitch, you might want to think about the preparing it ahead of time, writing it out, knowing what the script is going to be, knowing what the talking points are going to be. These are going to be important things to kind of think about. So, writing up different things is probably going to be a good idea. So you know what it is you'd want to say at different times as well. All right. So let's move on to now cover letters. So when we think about cover letters, cover letter is a standalone document, but it's not a duplication of your resume. So when we say it's a standalone document, we're really trying to look at it as oftentimes they are tied together is that they are a tandem, but a lot of times they're not because somebody's going to read one and then the other one afterwards. I personally think people, when they get a job applicant and they look through all the materials, the first thing they do is they read through the resume to scan through information about you, and then they read the cover letter as a secondary thing as well. But the idea is that your cover letter should actually be a little bit more information than what's just factually in your resume. Your cover letter is also good as a way to introduce yourself to a potential employer. So, and you want to explain in there why you think you're the best candidate for this position. You want to connect the dots between here's this job opening that you have to here's what I have that matches with that. And so you want to use it as a way to introduce certain things you want them to know. And then you always want to make sure that it's tailored to the position that you're applying to. So I think we've heard from some of the employers last week when they said, they know when somebody has applied to it because they don't change the name of the organization on the cover letter. So, that just shows the lack of attention to detail. But I think even more importantly than that, you want to make sure that your resume is aligned to the position and then your cover letters aligned to your resume as well. And really what you're trying to do with the cover letter is have them read it and then be reminded of maybe something they've already read in the resume, or they're going to read your cover letter and say, let me go back and find that information and where it sits in the resume. If we also do think about a cover letter, so a cover letter should be concise and direct. And so oftentimes when writing cover letters, we might get too stream of consciousness when we're writing it. We might want to include a lot of extra words that might not be necessary. And again, if you think of it, the more direct you can be with the information, probably the better. So present a clear idea of what it is that you offer, and I'll give you some structure of how those different sections would work. If you can, use casual language, but have language that has an enthusiastic tone. An enthusiastic tone about, I'm really excited to be applying to this job. I was really excited to see this opportunity, or I really feel strongly that I would be a good fit. But it doesn't have to be this very, very formal language. I'm not asking you to use slang. I'm not asking you to use, just very simple text. But you still want to make sure that it doesn't have to be it's not a book. You're not writing a book. You're not writing a term paper. You're not writing a journal article. Usually cover letters should be about 1 page. I think within 1 page, you usually should have enough room to put everything you need. But two-page cover letters are fine, especially for academic type of positions where you might have a lot of information that you're wanting to share about yourself. But usually cover letters can be about 1 page. And usually anywhere between 3 to 5 paragraphs. And each paragraph can have a different focus of what it is that it's trying to articulate and what it is that it's trying to say. But if we really kind of think about, having going longer than 5 sentences, more than, no more than 5 sentences per paragraph, because when you start to have a lot of sentences in each paragraph, it then kind of drones on in terms of the information you have there. And so breaking it up might be a better thing to do than having a lot of longer sentences in there too. All right, So a little bit of the getting started with the cover letter. So putting an address on there, would probably fine. Maybe contact information again that appears on the resume. Putting the date of when it is that you're submitting this cover letter, dating the information in there as well. Any type of company information that you can include, contact information, title, address, phone number, anything like that would be good as well. Having a proper salutation for whoever it is that you're giving it to. If you're unsure of who it is, I've heard varying things about, do you include dear hiring manager or recruiter? Whatever information you can find in the job description that tells you who to address it to would be fine. But you can use the to whom it may concern if you feel more comfortable doing that. I don't know if there's any right or wrong way to kind of do this. But if there is an actual person that's listed there that it should be directed to, you want to make sure that that's included. And then always starting with dear Mr. or dear Mrs. And use that individual's last name. It is probably important, even if it would be somebody that that's looking at this, and you speak to them by by your first name, still do the proper salutation with Mr. or Miss. All right. So after you get the kind of the contact information and addressing who it goes to and dates and things like that, we now want to talk a little bit about that first paragraph. And so that first paragraph is really the very much that introductory paragraph. So I think it's important that you want to mention how you learned of the organization and or the position. You want to always refer to the position title in this first paragraph. If you've had a personal connection to someone within the company, ask their permission if you can include their name in the cover letter. So if somebody has recommended or somebody has suggested that you should apply to the position, or somebody has, said they've made you aware of the company and the position, it's a good idea to include that information in there. Just make sure you get their permission ahead of time. The worst thing you can do is to put someone's name in your cover letter, them not being aware that you have put their name in there, and then they're asked about you and they have no idea that you've applied to this position or anything like that. Demonstrate your knowledge of the organization's mission and values. So one of the things you want to think about with this is, did you do your homework on this organization? What is it that you know? Have you gone to their website? Have you read through their mission statement? Have you read through their About Us part of their organization? What is it that you can demonstrate that that you have and seen and read about them that would make sense? And then finally, you want to explain how you think this position is a good fit for your career goals, your interests. So part of what you're saying with this is you see this opportunity of wanting to be able to be a part of this organization as a good fit for what you might want to do. And so you can find the phrasing that you think best makes this argument for you. There is no kind of right or wrong way to do it, but I do think these are important things to kind of keep in mind, especially in that introductory paragraph. A lot of times when I help students with their cover letters, they do a very good job of putting this information, but they put it at the end of their cover letter because they think it's a good summary of information. I then usually say, well, let's move this up to the top. Let's tell them at the top why you want to be working there and why you think you're a good fit. And then you can use the rest of the cover letter explaining how you want to make your argument or persuasive argument for why you want to be there. So keep that in mind too, that it is fine to state that at the beginning, why you want to be there, what it is that you hope to get out of it. Okay, middle paragraph. Now you want to explain what you can do for the organization. You want to summarize different parts of your education, your work experience, your interests, things that would be relevant to that employer. You want to highlight maybe 2 to 3 things that you see that have been advertised in the job description, things where you've met the qualifications for the job, things to show that you know in particular that this is what they're looking for and here's what I have that I've done something very similar to it. This is your sales pitch. So these middle paragraph, it could be paragraphs, I should say too. So it could be 2, 3, 4 paragraphs of information that's here, but it's your sales pitch. Your sales pitch to tell them, here's what you have, here's what you're looking for in the job, here's what I have that matches it. It's not you writing everything about yourself. It's really you writing the things that are most important for them based on that job. Now, when you read through this, you'll notice, like if I just identify the action verbs, so worked, I see that you've worked it, this person is working in a nonprofit. In that position, they administered HIV testing, that they've counseled participants, they've managed grants, they've worked within a team, designing and facilitating. So, these are all things that you can kind of notice in terms of, this part of it is kind of written a little bit how your resume is written with the action verbs and descriptions of what you've done. So matching those two things up is not a bad idea. Another thing that's important to kind of match up is the information that's in the job description. So I'd like you to kind of visualize a T-scale. If you had a T-scale in the middle of the page, what is it that you can be focusing on? So if we have this idea of, a job description is on the right side or on the left side, and those bullet points are all the things you pulled from the job description that said, here's what they're looking for, here's what they're looking for. The right side is going to be all the things in your resume that you think have a match for that. And then essentially then what you're doing is you're writing information in your cover letter that is of the things that are on the right side. So you're knowing like, okay, here are the key things I want to focus on. Here are the key things that I want to share because I've read through the job description. I've matched it up with what I have in my resume. Now I'm going to put those things in my cover letter as well. And if I focus on those things are probably going to be enough for the reader to know that I'm a good match for what this job is asking for. And then the final part of your cover letter, so your final paragraph. So this is where you want to express your interest in wanting to move on to the next stage of getting an interview. You want to state again, your resume is included for their review. You want to name what your follow-up action is going to be. So some of this might be is that I'll follow with an email 2 weeks after the position closes. If there's no date of when the position closes, I'll follow up two weeks after that this has been submitted. You can say that you might want to follow the phone call as well, or I'll call the number that's on the job announcement or something like that. But most likely this is going to be an email, and it's more of just to suggest this is what you're going to do. But I don't think that they're necessarily expecting, that, or don't expect that you're going to immediately get anything kind of, a response or anything kind of like this. But you want to state this is what you're going to do. But I also think it's really, important again to thank them for their time, thank them for their consideration of your application, give them again your contact information so that they know here are the best ways to reach me. Here's my phone number again, here's an email. Even though you already have that in a lot of other places, it's still a good idea of things to include in here as well. All right. Any questions on cover letters or anything I could mention or go over again when it comes in relation to cover letters? Well, if there are no questions on that, I will then move right on to talking now about personal statement. So we obviously, had an earlier session today with Jeanette talking about writing your own personal mission statement and the things that are important to do when considering what's important to you and your values, and that it's very highly personalized as well. But a lot of times when you are needing to write things for your public health career, you are going to have to put things in writing to talk about, who you are as a person in terms of what you'd want to be doing. And sometimes these things are going to be part of grad school applications. They're going to be part of maybe research proposals that you have to do. They just might be, useful information that somebody needs to have. And so part of what you want to think about in writing these personal statements is what goes into them and the steps. Sorry, just reading here Aaron's note. How do we know if we're incorporating too much of what can be found in the resume in our cover letter? So maybe Aaron, could you clarify what you mean by that?
Hi, sure. So I just know that you mentioned towards the beginning, make sure not to put too much of what can already be found in your resume and your cover letter because you don't want to duplicate. But I was
Mhm.
just wondering if there's any amount that we should be looking for to say, oh, maybe I'm, talking too much about what can already be found in my resume.
Got it. So I think if you think about in writing the cover letter, your cover letter is the opportunity for you to expand upon uh, a point or two from your resume. And part of what you can say when writing through the cover letter is the content could look the same, but it could be what was the impact that it had on you, what that experience had on you. So if you think your resume is much more about the facts and, I did this and it resulted in this, a cover letter could just say, what is maybe an impact this had on me, or this experience had on me, or what I learned from it. Those are harder to include in the resume. So you can personalize it there. You can get a little bit more, kind of in depth in terms of the reaction that you had to anything that you did in certain things there. Thanks. Okay. All right. So a little bit about kind of talking through, types of personal statements, uh, the purpose of the statement, and then steps to build a personal statement. So when we think about writing and thinking about personal statements, the idea too is there's a difference between a statement of purpose and a personal statement. And then, how you respond to specific questions or prompts. So a lot of times with a personal statement, you are going to have to be maybe answering some particular questions. You're going to have to be, you're going to be given a direction of something to give some response to. But usually with the statement of purpose, it's more of what your intent is. So some good examples of these, there's information from the PDCO. They have research statements. You can work on creating a motivation or goal statement. You can think about past research experiences and how they've impacted your decision to pursue a graduate degree. And then maybe another thing to keep in mind with this is why you're applying to this program and different things to think about there as well. And then oftentimes too, these statements and these are necessary when you're applying for fellowships and internships and also grants. And if we think about especially with fellowships, oftentimes you're providing this statement not as a way to showcase why I am the best for the fellowship, but I'm really trying to showcase why I have the most to gain from this experience, why I think I would benefit the most from being there. Same with applying to a graduate program. Not only you're trying to explain, here's why I'm a good fit, but also here's how I plan to use the experience of being at this particular program. And I need to give you more of a look ahead to how I plan to use this training afterwards as well. All right. So when we think a little bit about, a personal statement, a statement of purpose can fill the need in the eyes of any type of admissions committee. So part of what you want to think about this is that, a statement of purpose focuses on the student's reasons for applying to the program and states in writing their intended plans for training afterwards. And then personal statements lend to be more about, in more of a narrative essay. They're more self-reflective. They're more details about your past experiences. There is a clear delineation knowing that a student's goals and interests and how that kind of fits into the broader picture of what that applicant wants to be doing in relation to any type of thing that they're using it for. If we then start to think a little bit more about a research statement, so if there is a need for you to have to do research statements are usually more for people that are focused more on having a long-term career and being a scientist. And so you're usually answering questions around, what is your research to date? Why is it important to you? What is the research you want to do in the future? So sometimes a research statement can seem very similar or falls in the same realm as a personal statement, but these might be things you include in your research statement might also be things that are necessary to include in any type of personal statement. When we think about writing a motivation or goal statement, the things you're kind of talking about there is, this is my, career interest, my career, my research goals. And then how your particular program that you're looking at will have an impact on that future, how it will kind of fit in. So this is, a variation of that personal statement that you're going to have to make that you might have to kind of say for that when writing that personal statement. I have to know what my goals are. I have to know what I'm motivated to want to do. And then I do think it's a good idea when you're writing these to come up, with your own, for yourself, some prompts or some guiding questions for you to answer. And when you think about these, even before you start writing it, is, how is it that you're going to address certain things about yourself? So if the prompt is, describe your past experiences and how they impacted your graduation, impacted your decision to pursue a graduate degree. The question might be like, they're really wanting to know, like, why are you applying to this program? And so, you want to have, in your mind, some idea of why you're doing these certain things. What is pushing you to do these things? So it's not just you just spilling out information about yourself. It's really you wanting to address a certain thing, speak to a certain thing that they might be trying to find out. Again, going back to the idea of fellowships and internships. So personal statements can be used when applying for fellowships and internships. They are very much future oriented. So the idea of, kind of looking ahead. So, the question might be, to ask yourself, how will this internship fill in the gap between where I'm currently at and where I want to be? Or maybe how can I explain how I plan to use this fellowship after I've completed it? So these might be elements that you need to include if you're using or having to create a personal statement for a fellowship or an internship. When you're writing these for grants, you might want to think of a personal statement as more of an abstract of your overall grant application. That it's also just talking about how that statement of goals can be followed up by, how and what you're interested in wanting to do your research in. It can always include some sort of a brief academic history, and then also to the factors that go into your decision about doing what you might want to do. Maybe it's because you want to be there because there's a certain faculty member that you want to be mentored by or something like that. So if you're having to create a personal statement in the need for a grant, you have to kind of keep these things in consideration. These might be some of the things that committee or those directors are looking for when reviewing and reading through these statements. Let's see. So also, again, with grants, any type of addressing any type of issues you think may have come up in your application. Maybe it was being at one institution for a long time, that you took a break from your training, that what your publication record may look like, how many you have. If you ever had a chance, or if you ever had a time when your grades slipped or you didn't do so well, maybe how it is you can write about some perceived issues that might come up, whether it's personal family issues, why there was a delay. So anything you might want to address, this might be another place where you can, better explain something about yourself and better explain why something might look like a negative in your overall application. All right. So a statement of purpose. So when we talk about a statement of purpose, this is really talking much more about a picture of you that helps anybody that's reading this to identify what are your academic strengths and abilities, your ability to get funding. But it's also a way to demonstrate what's unique about you, how you set yourself apart beyond just your test scores. And then it's also a way for you to be able to demonstrate how serious you want to be as a scholar, as a scientist. So the purpose is much more of a motivation type of thing, and much more about answering the why this matters to you type of a question. So when we think about in terms of things to kind of address, think about what are a few of these things I might want to think about. Why do I want to do this program? Why am I interested in this? Why do I want to obtain this advanced degree that I'm getting? And knowing that just answering and addressing a few of these is probably a good idea, but it's you want to have a clear picture that you can put down on paper about why you're doing this. Again, knowing that the statements of purpose usually are open-ended and they're not really requiring you to get into a lot of details or giving you any prompts or things to kind of answer. So they're much more wanting to know what is your intent and different things like that. Other things you can address in these the statements of purpose, things about your background, extracurricular activities, things you've learned and other things that you've done. And again, explain and clarify any outstanding issues or anything that you think would be good for them to kind of know. All right. So when we start to kind of build a personal statement, best thing you would do first is you brainstorm. So you want to kind of brainstorm through as many different things about yourself as you can. So again, some of these guiding questions you can have: long-term plans. Will this enhance or narrow the academic or career prospects that I have? Do I need to attend right away? Do I need hands-on experience? Do I know what discipline I want to study? How well do I know where will I go? So, how well am I able to address and answer these questions for myself ahead of time before I even start writing? And giving yourself the space to really spend some time to think about these things and think about what it is that I want to say when I'm trying to answer these questions. If I'm not sure about these, maybe I need to get some help from a mentor. Maybe I need to get some help from a trusted advisor that can help me kind of figure out what some of these things are. And maybe what you'll learn in doing some of this is that your answers to these questions will certainly better inform the way and the structure that you're going to have for writing your personal statement. Next thing you want to do is organize all your ideas. So, once you've kind of gone through these questions, you've had the chance to kind of think about them. Maybe you've come up with a lot of different things you'd want to say. It's probably then a good idea to select some top themes. So what is it that stands out to you? What is it that seems to be a recurring thing? And then always start with the most important points, the things that you think are most important to address. And then if you need to, reorganize so that maybe has a different type of flow. Generally, when I read someone's personal statement, it always has a flow of going from past to present, then to future. And then I would always just say, well, what if you change around that flow to where you talk about what you're currently doing, what you'd want to do, and then how everything you've done has led up to this point. So you can play around with this, but you want to, think about how is it I can organize these thoughts. And then the next big thing is just start writing. So one of the things that can be hard about this is you get kind of very locked into the idea like, well, it has to be perfectly worded and structured here. Well, let's just focus on the experiences. Let's just try to be direct and clear. Let's put some things down on paper. Let's try to avoid anything to where I'm not trying to address. I don't need to say what I'm not good at, but just, what is it that I have in my background that I think is good to be able to share. But sometimes just the writing of it and getting a draft done so that you can come back to, and then getting another draft done, and then taking some time away and then coming back to it is usually a good idea as well. And knowing too that we're oftentimes harder on ourselves when we're writing these things than we actually really need to be. So sometimes maybe it's part of this step too, you can get somebody that can start to review this with you as you're writing it. Another good thing too is to read it aloud. So this is part of that kind of, making sure that it sounds the way you want it to sound. So it might seem weird to do it, but sometimes reading it does better than you trying to look at it and kind of read it internally to yourself. Check each paragraph for the structure of it. Does it have good natural transitions? Does there seem to be continuity to what it is that you're saying? Making sure that not only have you used spell check, but you've looked at all the words, because spell check is not always going to check everything. And then always looking for and seeking different types of feedback, anything like that. And then things to kind of remember, if you have any type of experience that you can illustrate, a past experience that's really, really helpful, that's a good idea. If you can unify anything you have with a theme or a thesis or a topic or something you might want to say, outline what it is you're going to say and the way you're going to say it. You can say there's, I have three things that that are really important to say. And you put that in the opening paragraph, and then go use the rest of your paragraph to explain those three things. And then ending your essay with a conclusion, something that refers back to what you led in with, something that refers back to something that you said at the very beginning. It is a good idea as well. So a little bit about the structure of it. Opening paragraph, a good opening. It demonstrates your interest to your audience, makes them want to read more, try to avoid cliches, use words that introduce the main idea, try to describe or set, something from your past or sharing your thought about what it kind of means to you. I oftentimes find with these, when I'm helping students in writing their opening paragraph or personal statement, they usually tell like, a story or something like that that they've been through is a good one to kind of start with. Again, similar to a cover letter, that middle paragraph, reasons for wanting to choose this field, what it is you have that relates to the field, experiences you think are matches, how the future training is going to finish, how your future is going to be after you finish that training. So it's, again, just like with the cover letter, it's that kind of visual of a T-scale. These are the things I think that they're looking for. Here are the things that I have that match up with that. And then finally, a closing paragraph, again, you want to state again a commitment to wanting to work in that field. You want to remind them too that, you're, wanting to, that you have the necessary skills to succeed in there, and that you have a strong interest in wanting to continue work in that particular field. That closing paragraph, I think in many ways too, is often too a good time to, do that kind of final sales pitch, do that final opportunity to, connect the dots for them about what it is you want to be doing and why it is you want to be doing it. Couple errors or couple of things to try to avoid, starting with autobiographical information, trying to make sure that you don't have too many, complex words, trying not to have too many I statements in there as well. Having a statement that doesn't really have a true sense of direction. You want it to kind of have a flow of information as well. I think oftentimes when people are writing their statements, they just kind of get down and they start writing out as much as they can, but it doesn't really have a kind of clear direction as well. And then looking at any type of writing guides that you can, and then revising and honing as much as possible. I found recently using Grammarly is a great way to check your grammar. I use it all the time. It does more than just any type of thing in Word. It gives you great suggestions of things to do. So, that's another tool that you can use, especially if you don't think that your writing skills are very good. It'll give you a lot of great, tips and advice on there as well. So, anything about personal statements or questions I can answer about it? Just to mention, these are some of the resources that I found of writing different types of personal statements, whether they are a research statement or they are, preparing for grad school or anything like that. And you can find some, good examples of what people have done for different things. Maybe not always for public health, but definitely, for any types of writing statements. Okay. So just talk a little bit about kind of email etiquette. So why is it important? It's important because obviously more and more of us are using email as a way to communicate. And, it's a way for us to share information very quickly. But sometimes people are not always very savvy of understanding, the relationship between how email can work in both personally and professionally. So the way that we email and communicate with our friends, the way that we email and communicate with our family may not be the ways that we should be emailing and communicating with coworkers, supervisors, or anybody that we would do. A lot of times what's hard about when doing emails for work is that readers can assign, meaning almost to everything that can be written. And maybe it's perceived in the wrong way or misunderstood or miscommunicated in some way. And so you want to be very conscious of that in terms of what I'm writing and thinking about what you're saying, because what you're lacking in an email are the nonverbal cues. And because you're lacking the nonverbal cues, you might be able to have picked up what somebody said in person as to know that it's a joke or to know that it's not something is really meant to be what it is. But in writing, the person might be reacting to it in a way that you were not intending. So we just want to be careful of that when doing any type of email. And because so much can be misinterpreted, people kind of think about because people are reading it as if it's a conversation, and that the person that is receiving that information may not be reading it that way. And then immediately, like I say, because you don't get that immediate feedback, sometimes things can be immediately misunderstood. And so I think it's one of those practices to where you might have had the time to where you're going to immediately write back to somebody very quickly. But you have to almost kind of say, okay, wait a second. Am I saying this the way that I want to? Or am I saying, do I want this to be read the way that I want it to be read? Maybe I should, change this wording, change this tone. Maybe I don't have to be this direct. Maybe I want to share a little bit more about this. And so because you don't want to have your what you're sharing to be misunderstood or misread. So this kind of goes to that idea is thinking twice about whether or not the content in your email is appropriate. So before you hit send, we kind of, give yourself 10 seconds basically. And part of what you might want to do is I can write something out and then just think to myself, okay, is this what I want to do? And I know personally I've done that countless times, is I can immediately write back to something and I write it out, but I don't hit send. And then I give myself a little bit of time to think about it, and then I'll revise it. I'll add something here, I'll change something there. Maybe I'll just rewrite the whole thing as well. Usually keeping your emails too to someone that's brief. So nobody likes to read like a long, they have to scroll 3 times to get through the whole email. So shorter is better. Trying to keep it to, one look on the screen is a good idea. Try to respond to emails within the same time span you would for a phone call. And then again, the same thing, the punctuation, grammar errors. Again, Grammarly is a good thing to help with that as well. You can just set it up, in part of your using your email replies. It'll show up there and give you suggestions of what to do. I know a lot of times people do when writing the emails, they'll use different types of fonts or different things like that. I think more professional is better. And just other little things as well. So again, when we talk about length, some say that doesn't matter, and others will say emails should be as long as you need to be. I think, in terms of the length, you choose what you think is best, but I think usually shorter is better, more direct. If you need to send something longer, put it into a document and attach that document as well. And then again, if it's necessary for a longer message, maybe it would be better also to, and sometimes to, instead of putting everything into an email, is to have a meeting about it as well. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. If you feel like you're writing a very, very, very long email, you might want to, just think maybe a meeting would be better to discuss a lot of this information. So write in a positive tone when I complete the assignment versus if I complete the assignment. Trying to use negative words, using emojis and winks and things like that. Very subtly, I wouldn't use them all the time. Try to keep it as professional as you can with not a lot of visualization and things like that in your emails as well. And then a good idea, and this is a tip that I heard a long time ago from somebody when it comes to attachments. So obviously we know that sending PDFs is much better than anything else. But a really good idea too is to, when you are attaching something, have as clear a title on that attachment as you can. Because the way that you say something for you might not always be the way that somebody else will receive and perceive that information. And then also to making sure that sometimes not every attachment that you're going to include is something that somebody can get. So if you need to send it a different way or anything like that. And then also to knowing that sometimes when you do send attachments, it might change the way that somebody receives that information, because maybe some firewalls are not allowing attachments to go through. I find too, with sending attachments, sometimes you can put into the message what you're attaching, just so that the person knows what is there as well. And that's a really good idea. And then not to overload somebody with too many attachments. And if you need to send separate emails, if you have more than one, or you have a lot of attachments to send as well. Any questions on anything here? Danielle said cover letter should include a success story relevant to the job posting. Not always. I mean, it's, not. I think a cover letter is a good way to be able to articulate how you have maybe what the job is asking for, but it doesn't always have, it could be a lesson learned, or it could be something that you got better at along the way. So it doesn't always have to be a success story. I think a lot of times it can be, information to show how you're continuing to get better at something. Okay. Well, I think we are right at time. So I just want to say thank you all for joining us at today's sessions. Hopefully you got something out of them. We will be having one more day of the Career Academy tomorrow on getting your first job and what to expect. So we have a good number of alumni that are coming back to talk about their experience. So I look forward to having you all join us at that tomorrow as well. Bye, everyone.